Hey y'all, it's Steve, Hobo with Wood. The last video I did on text editing, creating embossed text was so popular. We're going to do another one. This time it's going to be creating 3D or floating text with a shadow. It's going to bring that text or that font to even a new level. So stay tuned. Okay, so this will be a short video, and there's going to be a lot of good information at the very beginning. Some of you think you're going to grasp it, cut out, and you're not going to hang around to the end, and you're going to miss out on some very important tips. So you're going to want to watch this throughout, or else you're not going to get the effect or the desired effect you want when trying to create this style of font. So what I'm doing is, and I don't know how well it'll show up here, but I'm actually creating a shadow behind the font, and depending on your perspective when you're actually looking at the physical engraving, it can actually tend to make the text appear to float above the surface of the wood. So I call it my 3D text. So let's take a look at how we do this. So let's start with some basic text. Put it on my double alt layer and put it in line mode. And now I'm going to create two duplications of that by hitting Control D twice. And now with that already selected, I'm going to use my arrow keys to move it down 1, 2, 3. I'm over here in my edit mode. I don't want to be over there. Leave that in line mode. Now select that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just using my arrow keys to move it down 5 and to the right 5. And now with that selected, I'm going to hold my shift key and select one of the other duplications. I'm going to use my Boolean subtract tool over here, and now I'm going to put that on that layer. I will now select this, do an offset, say OK, put that in a fill mode, and now when you look at this, it is no longer just a basic text, but it has the illusion of being a three-dimensional image with the font being elevated and a shadow being created and cast behind it. So that's pretty slick. And you see how fast I did that. This is not hard to do. And if you think you've got your mind wrapped around it, go ahead and check out, go make your projects, and then send me all the questions about why it didn't work. So if you want to figure out all the ins and outs and all the do's and don'ts, watch this through the end. Okay, so we're going to start over. I'm going to delete all that. We're going to start from scratch. So we're going to put our basic font back up there one more time. I say we're going to put it up there. Select basic. Say OK. Select that. Put her on our double alt layer and put it in align mode. Now, you'll find that it's much easier to work in line mode when you're creating this this font. If you're trying to do it in fill mode and you're trying to select the different layers in fill mode, they can sometimes get in the way of each other. So put it in line mode for your creation whenever you're doing any editing or creating. Now I'm going to with that selected, I'm going to do Control D twice. There's 1, 2. There are 3 copies of that there now. And with that selected, I'm going to use my arrow keys in order to move it down and over into the position that I desire. Now, if your arrow keys, if you hit it once and it's jumping way too far, or you can't tell it's moving at all, come up here to your gears, your settings, and here is where you set your shape movement increments as far as how far you want it to move. And if I put this in millimeters so everybody can relate to it better, I set my arrow movement to 1 millimeter, my shift arrow to a 0.5 millimeter, and my control arrow to a 0.025 millimeter. So there I have it set in increments. That's a full millimeter, a 0.5 millimeter, and then half of a millimeter, quarter millimeter. So now with that set, I can use my arrow keys. I come down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I go over to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. With that selected, hold your shift key and select one of the other duplications, and we're going to use our Boolean tools. And since if you start with the offset that you moved first, and then you select one of the duplications, then the Boolean tool you want to use is here, A subtract B. But if you're not sure about which one is going to give you the result you want, you can come up here to Tools and your Boolean Assistant, and you can click on these, each individual one, to see your result. Now, depending on your computer and your speed and your settings, it's going to depend. You may get a faster preview, but that's all these are. These are all previews until you hit OK. So you can see that looks kind of like what we want, but it's not. That's definitely not what we want. That is what we want. And what's the difference between there and there? This is a union, and we do not want a union. And that one is definitely not the right result either. So we want to subtract. We want to subtract A subtract B. So OK. Now tell it OK. And if you see, the ants are crawling around the layer in the back, which is the one we just edited. And I'm going to put that on a different layer. So now we have our shadow in the background. Now it is important that when you move that, and when I moved it down 5 millimeters and to the right 5 millimeters, and you make that subtraction, that Boolean subtraction, now if you select just this piece and you start moving it around, you're not going to get the same results. It's not going to work. So if you don't like the position, you need to get it in the position you want before you make that subtraction, because you cannot move it once you've done it and it be a good, clean result. Now let's talk about doing the offset and why and how I set it up. All right, so if I select the original text and I use my offset tool, I want to make sure that all of the options are turned off. Turn off all the options. We do not want outer shapes only. We don't need to select any results, and don't delete anything, so just turn all of these off. And I do it in an inward offset, and I do a very small offset. In this case, I've got it set at about 0.5 millimeter. And the reason I do the inward and not the outward, because if you look, let's look at the dot on the eye. Right now this is an inward offset. Now the ants are crawling around the original image, and this shadow is a shadow of the original image. So if we do an outward offset, well, a couple of things have happened. We've just made that original image larger by 0.5 millimeter, so the shadow is going to be smaller than the top text. And also, if you look, see how now it just doesn't fit as well. The inward looks better and creates the illusion more effectively than doing the outward offset. So this is my design. Do it my way or else, okay? Do the inward offset, very small amount, and what that does, once you tell it okay, now you put that layer in a fill mode. Now it gives you more substance to engrave. It gives you a better image, but it's still an outline, if you will, of that font, that letter. It's not a solid engraving, and you just got the shadow behind it. This really helps create that illusion. And so now if we look at all of it, That's super, super sharp. Now also, if you look right here, nope, that one didn't do it. When you do, if you do an outward offset, little places like this in here, they tend to go away because now what you've done, instead of that offset going inwards, it went outwards, and you start filling in these gaps, and you start taking away the illusion of that floating above the letters. And you don't want a lot, you want just a small amount. And like here, if that was moved a half a millimeter outward instead of inward, this gap gets really, really small, and you get less of that illusion of the floating. So do it my way or else, okay? Don't make me come to your house. So that's that in a nutshell. That's the technique on how to do it. Now for some more extremely valuable tips that another part of you aren't going to watch, this is what you should do. If we delete this and I start with just a line of text, if this is a complete engraving that I've got that I want to have the shadow effect on, you can create the shadow at any size you want and it not be too much of a problem. So if I come here and let's put this on align mode on our black layer, do that Control D twice, move it down 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 5. See, I'm doing this. You don't have to do it one word at a time. I'm doing all of this all at one time. Hold my shift button, select one of those, do my subtraction, put it on the blue layer. Now here's what you want to be careful of. If you come in here and you select your offset of the original, and it looks good here, but you don't have this already sized to its proper size. If you bring this down, Control D, because I did that at a 1/2 millimeter offset just now, a 1/2 millimeter inward offset. Didn't want to do that. Undo that. Select everything, and now you draw that down, and you start resizing your text. Well, if you zoom in good and tight, and we look at this offset here, it was a 1/2 millimeter, but what is it now? If I measure that, it's 0.14 millimeters. So we've just lost, what, 80% of the width of that by shrinking that down. So now you're back to the same problem you had before. The reason you did the offset was because it wasn't going to be that visible. Well, if you create that offset, then you shrink it down, it's not going to work that great. So what you want to do was undo all that. Take her back. And let's put her, come on, there we go. All right, so there it is, our shadow with the original line text. And now if we bring this and we shrink this down and we get it to the size we want, and then you select your text and you do your offset inward and put it in fill mode, now you can see that. But now see that now that you've got it that small, that 1/2 millimeter is actually kind of making things muddy. So you want to make sure you've got it to your size that you're going to design with before you do your offset. So now offset, and that 0.5 was too much, so let's do 0.3. That looks better. Put that in a fill. All right. That looks a lot better. Now that will be nice and visible when you do the engraving, but it wouldn't have been if we done it at the enlarged size, did the offset, and then shrunk it down. So you want to have your text, it'd be ideal to have your text at its correct size before you start this illusion, because once you start changing your size after you do your illusion, well, you start to lose some of those features that create the illusion. Not only should you have the text at its correct size before you start this editing, you want to have everything positioned where it needs to be before you start creating the illusion of a shadow. Because the way shadows work are from what? From a light source, right? So if you've got a light source here that's creating a shadow here, then you start moving these text around after you've created the shadows. Well, the shadows may not align properly. You may have a shadow over here and then a shadow over there. So get everything to the correct size and in its correct position in the layout, then create your shadow. Now for the last tip that's going to be missed by so many people, that's really the clincher on making this work so well, is in the settings. Because you're trying to create a shadow, right? Well, you do not want this blue layer on this. In this case, this is on the blue layer. You don't want the shadow to be engraved as dark as the outline of the letters. And you want it to be just really just kind of barely there, barely noticeable. And that's going to vary depending on the wood, the material that you're engraving. So you're going to have to test and know the products. You're going to have to know your laser. But if you can see on this one, the creating 3D text is a lot darker and heavier than the shadow. It was done at a much lower power. And that's the real clincher here. Here, I've got the power set at 70% power on the engraving on the black layer, but only 30% power on the shadow. So that's another thing that you'll have to use your knowledge of your equipment and your material to help really find that perfect power and speed and settings, but that's the trick. Do not engrave it. Don't burn that. Don't blazon it in. Just create that hint of a shadow of that there with the darker letters, and that hint of a shadow, that really seals the illusion of it being a shadow and it being the top text being elevated. So that concludes the tips on creating this illusion with your fonts, and this can work with any of the fonts. And I want to take this time to say thank you for watching. Thank you for all of the subscribers. Thank you for continuing to help this channel grow. I am depending on this channel and the revenue I get from YouTube to make it. This is my retirement. This is how I'm paying my bills right now. So thank you for watching. Thank you for hanging around. All of my patrons, you are appreciated more than I can express. If you haven't been to my Patreon page and you haven't considered signing up, please do that now. If you are enjoying the files that I put up on Laser Maker's Realm, every 2 weeks there's a free file from me on Laser Maker's Realm. But after I load up, actually it's before I load up the files to Laser Maker's Realm, my patrons get that file first and for free, in addition to 1 or 2 additional files for every one file that I put up on the Laser Maker's Realm. So if you're buying files from Etsy or any other cut file source, and you're paying anywhere from $1 to $5 for patterns and designs, I'm giving them away for free at a rate of anywhere from 3 to 6 a month or more, 4 to 8 a month for free. to all of my patrons, regardless what level you sign up on. I have 3 tiers. If you can't see it in your heart to do more than just the bronze level, it's $3 a month. $3 a month gets you all those free files. The next one is $9 and then $20. I would appreciate as many patrons as I can get. I appreciate the ones I've got. Bless you. Thank you. And until the next video, I'm Steve, Hobo with Wood, and I'm out.